Ancient Egypt, cradle of civilization, 3,000 years of sophisticated culture, breathtaking art and engineering marvels, advanced medical practices that were famous throughout the ancient world. But just how advanced was their medical knowledge? And what was their understanding of mental illness? Hi, I'm Professor Graeme Yorston, and today I'm going to be talking about the mysteries of ancient Egyptian medicine. What we refer to as ancient Egypt was actually a succession of over 30 royal dynasties that ebbed and flowed in their reach and power, with periods of being taken over and subjected to foreign rule as adjacent empires expanded and then fell away. But throughout it all was a culture that lasted for 3,000 years. For a long time, much of what we knew about ancient Egyptian medicine came from the writings of Greek physicians and historians, who visited the country around 500 BCE, a time that was as distant from the start of the first dynasty 5,000 years ago as it is from today. The Greek historian Herodotus, often referred to as the father of history, visited Egypt and described the Egyptian people as among the healthiest in the world. He said they purged themselves every month for 3 days successively, seeking to preserve health by emetics and clysters. He said of Egyptian doctors, "Each physician is a physician of one disease and of no more. And the whole country is full of physicians, for some profess themselves to be physicians of the eyes, others of the head, others of the teeth, others of afflictions of the stomach, and others of the more obscure ailments." Some of his observations are slightly suspect, as they are not supported by archaeological evidence and do not appear in other sources. Take, for example, "The women make water standing up and the men crouching down." He also describes an Egyptian phallic festival in which human effigies were carried, each of which had an enormously exaggerated penis that could be raised or lowered by women pulling strings. Sounds interesting, but nothing like this has been described elsewhere. There are plenty of statues and images of the well-endowed god Min, so perhaps Herodotus misinterpreted the accounts of other travellers. Or maybe it reflects Greek ideas that large penises were associated with the lustful vulgarity of satyrs, the lower classes, and barbaric foreigners. The perfect noble Greek male may have had bristling muscles, but he always had a rather modest appendage. We also know that the Greek physician Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, visited Egypt to learn about Egyptian medical techniques, and that 600 years later Galen also visited. Both of these heavyweights of ancient medicine acknowledged the importance of Egyptian traditions in their own work, and their influence on European medical thinking was profound and enduring, continuing well into the 19th century when science gradually took over. But all of these visits occurred at times of great change in Egyptian society, and there had been trade and cultural contacts between Egypt and Greece for at least 2 centuries before this. Herodotus probably visited Egypt around 454 BCE, when the Athenian fleet was assisting in a major uprising against Persian rule, and Hippocrates a few years later, after the rebellion had been crushed. Galen visited the Roman province of Egypt over 150 years after the last pharaohs were dead and buried. The reason we had to rely for so long on Greek sources was because when the temples of the Egyptian gods were closed down during the Christianization of the Roman Empire, the ability to read the hieroglyphics on the centuries-old inscriptions and papyri was lost. They lay buried in the desert sands for the next 1,500 years, until a curious black slab with inscriptions on it was discovered in the port of Rosetta, modern-day Rashid, near Alexandria in 1799 by Napoleon's troops on his expedition to Egypt. It was soon realized that the inscriptions in Greek, hieroglyphs and Demotic, a simplified script used in the Nile Delta, were the key to unlocking the mysteries of ancient Egypt, and over the next 20 years Thomas Young, Jean-François Champollion and others gradually worked out the details. The work they started continues to this day, with scholars deciphering texts buried in museum vaults using pioneering techniques that now allow the most fragile papyri to be read without opening them, and to see faded images and hieroglyphs written in invisible ink. All of this information has been used to build up a picture of how medicine was practiced in ancient Egypt. It confirms Herodotus' observations that the medical profession was well organised, with a complex hierarchy of different ranks of doctor and physicians specialising in different clinical areas, including those who focused on the lower digestive tract, who went under the charming name of shepherds of the anus. Other more bizarre titles included doctor who supervises butchers and inspector of liquids. One of the first physicians mentioned by name in Egyptian writings was Imhotep. No, not that one. Or that one. The real Imhotep was an architect, mathematician and administrator, as well as a doctor, and is said to have designed the step pyramid at Saqqara around 2600 BCE. He was later deified and had several temples dedicated to his worship, including one on the island of Philae in the middle of the Nile. Sleeping in Imhotep's temple was a powerful remedy for all kinds of ailments, as contact with the gods could be made through magical incantations, and they could be asked about the future to see if any dangers lay ahead or whether any evil spells had been placed on them. Healing dreams experienced during a temple sleep could also cure them of their afflictions. At least one female doctor is known from the 4th dynasty, when the great pyramids of Giza were being built. Pesachet, who bore the title Lady Overseer of the Lady Physicians. This has been widely interpreted as proof that there were lots of female doctors in ancient Egypt, but other sources suggest Egyptian society was highly gendered, and it is not clear if this was a one-off title for a particular individual or reflected widespread involvement in medicine by women. We have to be careful in equating pharaonic healers with modern-day physicians. Religion, healing and magic were one and the same in ancient Egypt, in a way that has not been present in mainstream Western medicine for hundreds of years. It might be helpful at this point to explore some of the Egyptian beliefs about life and death, to better understand their ideas about healing. They believed in a mysterious force that permeated the universe and connected all things, and that a change in one thing would produce a disturbance in everything else. Sound familiar? Yes, I thought so too.
In the force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in
They
terror.
saw death not as an ending of life, but as an extended sleep, during which they would continue their normal lives and carry on with all their usual activities, including their conjugal duties. Life and death were part of a continuous cycle, and careful preparation for life after death had to be made by undertaking complex rituals and organising elaborate funeral ceremonies. Health in life depended on a person's relationship with the gods, with fellow mortals, with animals, spirits and demons. Good health came from a balance in the flow of air and fluids such as blood, semen, mucus and tears in the 22 vessels of the body, and illness from a blockage in the vessels by noxious matter. The gods could bring illness or heal the sick as they saw fit. You may know some of the more well-known gods and goddesses, but there were hundreds of Egyptian deities, and their positions in the pantheon and their precise roles shifted over the centuries. Thoth was an important healing god, usually represented as either a monkey or an ibis, or as a man with the head of an ibis. He was considered to be the god of wisdom and the creator of secret healing formulae, and he served as physician to the other gods. Amongst his more prosaic inventions was the enema, because he used his curved ibis beak to wash the residues of digestion from his rectum. Even the life of a god isn't all champagne and truffles. Sekhmet was a lion-headed goddess who could send disease upon men. At first she was worshipped through fear that her anger would bring disease, and was known as the destroyer of mankind. But later she evolved into a more benevolent goddess of healing. But it was the goddess Isis who was the most important of the healing deities. She was at the centre of the creation legend, in which the king Osiris is murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, who then usurps his throne. Isis, their sister, collects the body parts of Osiris from all over Egypt and reassembles him, and by lying over his body conceives their son Horus, who restores order to the land. Over time, this belief was extended to the idea that every sick person could be cured by Isis, and Set, the jealous brother, became a symbol of evil who was feared as a bringer of sickness and plague. So, if everything was at the whim of the gods, was there anything mere mortals could do to mitigate their wrath? A little. Cures for illnesses sent by the gods were generally based on magic and religion, the aim being to remove the cause of a disease by driving out a demon or the ghost of a dead person. But there are hundreds of surviving prescriptions for the symptomatic relief of different conditions, made from natural, if somewhat exotic ingredients. Tortoise bile, for example. You don't find that at your average pharmacy. The prescriptions vary enormously. Some specify the exact quantities of ingredients and the vehicle for administration, such as milk, beer, or wax. Others simply list ingredients, many of which we cannot work out. Remedies were administered orally, rectally, vaginally, applied to the skin, or even burned so that fragrant smoke could be blown into the various bodily orifices. Some believe that the symbol for prescriptions used to this day by doctors is a stylized form of the Eye of Horus. A wide range of foodstuffs and herbs were used, including coriander, cumin, date, poppy seeds, willow buds and wormwood, all of which have psychoactive properties. They may also have had a drug that is referred to in Homer's Odyssey as having its origin in Egypt, nepenthe, which literally means no more pain, as it caused those who took it to forget all their pain and sorrow. There has been much speculation about what this could have been: opium, cannabis, borage, blue lotus, but as yet we have not been able to recreate the magical anti-sorrow formula. Similarity between two things was considered important. It was thought that objects with similar shapes or names could influence each other. For example, a kidney-shaped leaf on a plant gave it power to heal kidney disorders. Another healing power that we would consider odd today was transference. For example, rubbing the site of a headache with the head of a fish, so that the headache transfers to the fish. Although there is much that we would consider strange and unscientific in ancient Egyptian medicine, there is no doubt that some of the surgical and dental practices documented in the dozen or so medical texts that have come down to us were well ahead of their time. In my next video, I'm going to explore these medical papyri in more detail to find out what the ancient Egyptians thought about mental illness and how to treat it. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and keep the comments and suggestions for new topics coming in. Cheerio for now.